I need you to understand something before I start. I am not the kind of person who sees things. I don't startle easily. I don't have an overactive imagination. I worked nights for 6 years before Hargrove. Parking structures, office buildings, a hospital once, and I never had a problem. You learn to read a space. You learn the difference between a building settling and something being wrong. You develop a sense for it. On October 14th, at 1:17 in the morning, I walked into the West Wing rear gallery, and something that had been standing with its back to me for 11 weeks turned around. And I understood in that moment that I had never developed a sense for anything. That whatever sense I thought I had been completely, catastrophically wrong. I'm going to tell you how I got there. The first 3 rounds were completely normal. It was on the 4th round, around 2 a.m., that I noticed the count was off. West Wing, rear section. According to my sheet, jazz musician, Victorian explorer, suffragette, civil rights leader. 4 figures. I counted 5. The extra one was at the back, taller than the others. Thin in a way that made the proportions look slightly wrong. Arms a little too long, shoulders a little too narrow. Plain gray suit, no period detail, no plaque, no identifying features. Face turned toward the wall. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds doing what any reasonable person would do, assuming I'd miscounted. Recounting, getting 5 again, checking the sheet, getting 4 listed, counting the figures again. 5. I wrote it in the binder. Unknown figure in West Wing rear, not on inventory sheet. Check with management. Nobody checked with management. Or if they did, nobody told me anything. By the end of week 2, I'd started calling him the Gray Man. In my head only. It felt wrong to say it out loud, though I couldn't tell you why. He was always in the West Wing rear, always near the back. The position of his face shifted slightly night to night, sometimes more toward the room, sometimes more toward the wall, but always facing away from me. I told myself it was the restoration team adjusting the figures during the day. I never saw evidence of that. I told myself anyway. Week 3, I mentioned him to Petra, a weekend guard. The tall one in the gray suit, I said. West Wing rear. Who is he supposed to be? She frowned. There's no figure back there, just those 4. There's a gap, waiting on a new piece. Petra, I've walked past that figure 50 times. She looked at me carefully. Daniel, I've worked here 3 years. There is no figure in that spot. I went back that night with my phone. He was there. I took 12 photographs. 11 showed the section clearly. Jazz musician, explorer, gap, suffragette, normal. 4 figures, a gap. The 12th photograph was completely dark. Not corrupted, just dark, like the light had declined to illuminate that corner of the room. I still have that photograph. The shape of something tall is in it, if you look long enough. Week 4. The camera in the West Wing started glitching. Not constantly, just on certain passes, certain times of night. The footage would go to static for anywhere between 3 and 11 seconds, then come back normal. Maintenance looked at it twice and found nothing wrong with the hardware. I started logging the exact times it happened. They were always between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. They were always in the West Wing. I told myself it was a coincidence. I was spending a lot of time telling myself things. Week 6. I found a footprint. West Wing rear, just inside the entrance to the back section. The floor there was slightly dusty. The restoration team didn't clean that corner often. Single footprint, facing inward toward where the gray man stood. Long, narrow. the proportions slightly wrong in a way I couldn't immediately identify, and then could. The toes were too close together. Not deformed, just arranged differently than a human foot arranges itself in a shoe. I photographed it. I showed it to Gerald the next morning. He looked at it for a long time. "Probably just a weird angle," he said. "Dust does strange things." He didn't look at me when he said it.
Week 8, I started having trouble with the East Wing. Not the gray man, the other figures, the normal ones, the ones on my sheet, the ones I'd named and cataloged and walked past hundreds of times. I'd looked at them on my rounds and something would feel different. Not their positions, not anything I could point to, just a quality of attention, like being looked at from multiple directions at once. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I was letting the gray man get in my head and it was bleeding over. I did my rounds. I logged them. I told myself I was fine. Week 9, a figure in the East Wing was in a different position. Not dramatically, just a woman in a 1940s dress, standing near the window. I had walked past her 100 times. I knew the angle of her face, the direction of her gaze. She was looking at the door. She had never been looking at the door. I stood there for a long time. Then I wrote in the binder, "Figure repositioned in East Wing, 1940s woman near window, was facing left, now facing door, restoration team." Nobody responded. She was facing the window again on my next shift. I didn't write that one down.
October 14th. I arrived at 9:52 p.m. First round, 10:07 p.m. Everything normal. West Wing rear, 4 figures, a gap. No gray man. I felt relief so strong it was almost physical. Stood there in the doorway of the rear section and just breathed for a moment. Maybe it was over. Maybe whatever I'd been seeing had been something else. Tiredness. Stress. Maybe the restoration team had finally moved the piece and I'd just been miscounting for 11 weeks like an idiot. I logged around, ate my sandwich, did my second pass. He was back at 11:34 p.m., same position, gray suit, facing away, arms too long. I stood at the entrance to the rear section and looked at him and felt the relief drain out of me completely, replaced by something I don't have a clean word for. Not fear, exactly. Something older than fear. Something that lives underneath it. I logged the round, kept moving. 1:17 a.m. Third round. West Wing rear. He was facing the room. Not angled, not turned slightly toward me. Fully, directly facing the room. Facing me. For the first time in 11 weeks. I want to describe what I saw, and I find that I can't. Not because I didn't look, because the looking didn't translate into anything my brain knows how to store. I have the memory of standing there. I have the memory of my eyes being open, of the beam of the baseboards catching the gray of his suit, of the shape of him against the dark. I do not have the memory of his face. What I have instead is a feeling. The specific feeling of looking at something that should not be looked at. The feeling of a door opening inside you that you didn't know was there, and something on the other side becoming aware of the light. I tried the radio. Static. I tried the front desk line. Ringing. No answer. I stood at the entrance to the rear section, and I did not go in, and I did not look away, because something very old and very quiet in my brain said that looking away was wrong, that whatever the rules were in this situation, maintaining eye contact was one of them. We looked at each other for 4 minutes. My phone tells me that. It felt like much longer. Then the baseboards went out. I logged the round. Kept moving. Then the baseboards went out. Complete darkness. Not the normal partial dark of a museum at night. Complete. Emergency lighting, exit signs, security panel, everything gone. I turned on my phone flashlight. 6 feet of beam in every direction. The rest of the world, just black. I heard something. I want to be careful how I say this. It was not footsteps. It was not breathing. It was not any sound I have a name for. It was the sound of something moving through space in a way that space was not designed to accommodate. Like the air itself was being asked to do something it had never been asked to do before. It was coming from the rear section. It was getting closer. I backed toward the main hall, one hand on the wall, phone out, trying to keep the beam ahead of me. Not running. Something told me not to run, the same something that had told me not to look away. I moved carefully, deliberately. The sound followed, not fast, not slow, patient in a way that was worse than either. I reached the entrance to the West Wing main corridor, turned the corner, put my back against the wall and held the phone out and watched the darkness at the end of the corridor where the rear section was. Silence. The breathing HVAC, gone. The flicker of baseboards, gone. The distant hum of the building that you stop noticing after a week but is always there. Gone. Silence so complete it had weight. And then something touched the back of my neck. I had not heard anything approach from behind. There was nothing behind me. I had put my back against the wall specifically so there was nothing behind me. But something touched the back of my neck and I felt 2 points of contact, deliberate and precise, like fingertips finding a specific place. The temperature was wrong. Not cold, not warm. Absent. Like being touched by something to which temperature had never applied. Like the concept of warmth had simply never reached it. It lasted 2 seconds. Then it was gone. I did not scream. I think some part of me understood that sound in that moment was an invitation. I ran. I don't know where I was for the next 40 minutes. At 1:58 a.m., the lights came back on. I was standing near the front entrance of the main hall. I don't know how I got there. My phone showed the time. My legs were tired in the way legs get tired when you've been moving, not standing. I walked back to the West Wing rear. He was there, facing away, gray suit, arms too long, face toward the wall, same as always, same as week 1, like nothing had happened, like I had imagined all of it. I went to the front desk. I picked up the binder. I wrote, in the log for 1:58 a.m., all clear. Then I sat down on the floor and waited for sunrise. I quit the next morning. Left a voicemail. Didn't go back. I've looked into the museum's history. Nothing unusual. I've searched for any record of the figure, acquisition documents, commission records, anything. Nothing. I spoke to 2 former night guards. Neither mentioned the West Wing unprompted. Both went quiet in a specific way when I said, "Gray suit." One of them said, "I didn't go back there after the 2nd week." I asked why. Long pause. "It watched me tie my shoe once," he said. I looked up and it was... I left it alone after that. I asked if he'd reported it. He laughed. Not a funny laugh. "To who?" he said. "And say what?" I'm recording this because I find I can't talk about it. I can record it. There's a difference. I've gotten strange about being touched. Someone taps my shoulder and I have to take a moment. I have to remind myself what touch is supposed to feel like. That hands are warm. That warmth is the default. That absence is the exception. I'm working on that. The museum is still open. Their website has a virtual tour. I made it as far as the West Wing before I closed the tab. The photograph showed the jazz musician, the explorer, the Gap, the Suffragette, the civil rights leader. 4 figures and a gap. I've counted them 40 times. 4. But the gap is in a different place than I remember. It used to be between the explorer and the Suffragette. In the photograph, it's at the end of the row, like something stepped out of it, like something is somewhere else now. I'm sure that's nothing. I'm sure I'm misremembering. I'm fine.